Hi everyone. Today we are going to deal with lung volumes and capacities. What are lung volumes and what are lung capacities? Consider a lung as a water bottle. Now the lung volume will be the amount of water in one specific section of the bottle. But lung capacity is the total amount of water in two or more sections added together, which means lung volume is the volume of air present in a single phase of the respiratory cycle, that it is an individual component. It cannot be further divided. But lung capacity is the sum of two or more lung volumes, which means it represents the lung's ability to hold air under different conditions. Now let us see what are the lung volumes and what are the capacities. We have two classifications. There is static lung volume and capacities and dynamic lung volume and capacities. Under static lung volume and capacities, we have lung volumes as tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, and residual volume. And capacities as vital capacity, inspiratory capacity, functional residual capacity, and total lung capacity. Under dynamic lung volume and capacities, we have maximum voluntary ventilation, forced expiratory volume, maximum mid expiratory flow rate, and peak expiratory flow rate. Now let us see each one of them. First, let us move on to static lung volumes and capacities. So let's first discuss lung volumes. First is the tidal volume. What is tidal volume? It is the volume of air inspired or expired during a quiet breathing. What is a quiet breathing? It is the normal breathing that we are doing in the day-to-day life. That is the volume of air that is we are breathing in and out during our day-to-day life is the quiet breathing. In adults, the normal tidal volume is 500 ml. But of this 500 ml, 150 ml of air fills the airway from nose and mouth down up to the respiratory bronchioles. And this volume of air does not take part in any gas exchange and is known as the anatomical dead space. The remaining 350 ml of this 500 ml will take part in the alveolar ventilation. Next is the inspiratory reserve volume. It is the volume of air inspired with maximal inspiratory effort in addition to the normal tidal inspiratory volume, which means the inspiratory reserve volume is the additional volume. Apart from the normal tidal inspiratory volume, how much amount of or how much volume of air we can inspire by a maximal inspiratory effort is known as the inspiratory reserve volume. It is different for both men and women. In men, it is 3.3 liters and in women, it is 1.9 liters. Next is the expiratory reserve volume. It is similar to that of the inspiratory reserve volume. It is the volume of air expired with maximal expiratory effort after a normal tidal expiration. So, after a normal breathing, how much volume of air you can expire with a normal expiratory effort is known as the expiratory reserve volume. It is also different for both men and women. In men, it is 1.2 liters and in women, it is 0.7 liters. The last one is the residual volume. The residual volume is the volume of air left in the lungs at the end of a maximal expiratory effort. So you are expiring with your maximum effort. So the volume of air which is remaining in the lungs even after a maximal effort is known as the residual volume. It is 1.2 liters in men and 1.1 liter in women. Now let us move on to the capacities. The first one is the vital capacity. Vital capacity is the maximum volume of air that can be expired after a maximal inspiratory effort. It is 4 liter in men and 3 liter in women. Vital capacity can be damaged in many conditions like neurological disease affecting muscles of respiration like neuritis, poliomyelitis, etc. Diseases of muscles like myasthenia gravis, deformities of thoracic cage like kyphosis, scoliosis, etc. and many other diseases. The next one is the inspiratory capacity. It is the maximum volume of air that can be inspired after a tidal expiration. That is, you are breathing out. Normally, you are breathing out, and the maximum volume of air that can be inspired after that tidal expiration is known as the inspiratory capacity. It is the addition of tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. The normal volume of inspiratory capacity is 3.5 liters. Next is the functional residual capacity. It is the volume of air remaining in the lungs at the end of each tidal expiration. It is the addition of expiratory reserve volume and residual volume. Normally, it is 2.2 to 2.5 liter. The functional residual capacity is very important in order to maintain stable gas tension in the lung so that at all times enough air is available for gas exchange along the alveolo-capillary membrane. After the expiration, your lung cannot be left with no gas because it will lead to lung collapse. So, at all times, some air should be available in the lungs for gas exchange. Also, it prevents sudden alteration in gas tension and reduction in this FRC may result in hypoxia. So, functional residual capacity increases when there is air trapping in lungs and seen in asthma or emphysema, which are conditions of hypoxia. Next is the total lung capacity. The total lung capacity is the volume of air present in the lungs at the end of maximal inspiration. So, after a maximum inspiration, how much volume of air is left in your lungs is known as the total lung capacity. It is 6 liter in men and 4.2 liter in women. This figure is very important. You have to study this figure. It is the total, it is the different volumes and the capacities. As you can see, the different capacities are the combination of various volumes. Now let's move on to dynamic lung volumes and capacities. So dynamic volumes and capacities have application in conditions with impaired expiratory flow like emphysema, bronchial asthma, etc. They help in clinical evaluation of dyspnea and pulmonary disability. Let us see what are the dynamic lung volumes and capacities. First is the maximum ventilatory volume. Maximum ventilatory volume is the volume of air that can be moved into or out of the lung in 1 minute by maximal voluntary effort is called as maximum ventilatory volume. The normal volume is 125 to 170 liter per minute and they are decreased in conditions like emphysema and asthma. The next one is the forced expiratory volume or timed vital capacity. The forced vital capacity is the largest volume of air that can be expired forcefully after a maximal inspiratory effort. This is known as forced expiratory volume. Now, what is timed vital capacity? The timed vital capacity is the fraction of forced vital capacity that is expired during the first second, first 2 seconds, and first 3 seconds of the forced expiration. It is known as FVV1, FEV2, FEV3. It can also be called as TVC1, TVC2 and TVC3. It is used for monitoring pulmonary disorders. Like in chronic diseases like emphysema, vital capacity remains within normal limit but timed vital capacity will show abnormality. It is helpful in the early detection. It is very important to differentiate between obstructive and restrictive diseases. In restrictive disease, total vital capacity will be reduced but timed vital capacity will be normal. In obstructive diseases, total vital capacity may be reduced or normal but timed vital capacity is reduced very much. Now look at this graph. It will be more clear for you after explaining this graph. This graph shows us the timed vital capacity of 3 cases. A normal subject, a case of obstructive lung disease, and a case of restrictive lung disease. In this graph, the x-axis shows us the time in seconds, which means it shows how long the person has been exhaling forcefully. And the y-axis shows us the volume in liters. It shows how much air is still present in the lung. At the start, that is at the 0 second, lung contains a vital capacity of about 5 liters. As the person exhales, the lung volume is decreasing. In a normal person, after taking a deep breath, a normal person blows out air very rapidly. As a result, the curve will fall steeply. This means most of the air comes out in the first second itself. See, most of the air has already come out in the first second. Only a small amount remains after the first second. But in case of an obstructive lung disease such as bronchial asthma, COPD, chronic bronchitis, emphysema and all, the airway will become narrowed or obstructed. So the air cannot leave the lung quickly. As a result, the graph will fall only slowly. See, this is the graph of an obstructive lung disease case and this is only falling slowly. The patient needs more time to empty his lung. Here in this graph we can see that at first second only a small amount of air has come out. Much air is still trapped inside his lung. But eventually almost whole the vital capacity may come out but it takes time. So in this case, the vital capacity is normal, or it can be normal or slightly decreased. But the TVC1, this is the normal TVC1. It has markedly decreased in the case of obstructive lung disease. And this is due to the narrowing or increased resistance of the airway. In the case of restrictive lung disease, such as pulmonary fibrosis, tuberculosis, sarcoidosis, and all, the lung of the patient will become stiff. So, the lung cannot expand fully, and hence the patient will inhale only less air. As a result, the lung volume of the patient is already low. As we can see in this graph, the curve starts at a lower volume. Initially, the vital capacity was 5 liter, and now it has become 3 liter. But the patient is exhaling quickly, so the curve is very steep. But since there wasn't much air to begin with, we are already beginning with a low volume, the total expired volume is small. In this case, we can see that the vital capacity has decreased from 5 liter to 3 liter. Also, the timed vital capacity has been decreased from normal. But both the decreases are proportionate. Hence, FEV1 or TVC1 by FBC ratio remains normal, or some cases it may increase. The next is the peak expiratory flow rate. It is the flow rate at the peak of the forced vital capacity. It is measured using Wright's peak flow meter and electron spirometer. The normal value of peak expiratory flow rate is 400 to 600 liter per minute. The next one is the maximum mid-expiratory flow rate. The average flow rate of airflow during the middle two quarters of the forced vital capacity, that is between the 25 to 75% is known as the maximum mid-expiratory flow rate. It helps us to assess the small airway function. The normal value is 200 to 400 liter per minute. So that's it for lung volumes and capacities. I hope you guys understood. Thank you.